Welcome to CAB Radio 2.0. Here are your hosts, Chris Perkins, Mark Cummins, and Jeff Giles.
Hi, Mark. How's it going?
I'm doing well. How are you guys doing?
All right. Thank you.
Not too bad. We one of my co-hosts here also has the name Mark. So how are we gonna do?
Hello, Mark.
What are we gonna call you, Mr. Cummings?
Mark C. We'll just call me Mark C.
I'm not going to remember that.
Neither am I.
You guys could just refer to me as the schmuck from Long Island. I'm kind of used to that.
Nice.
That's being nice compared to what I usually get from these politicians that I speak to every day.
Uh-oh. What sort of you mean like legit, actual politicians, or people who are trying to hack into the system, like the good kind, the people who actually mean well?
I speak to bureaucrats and politicians of all stripes. I've spoken to low-level tyrants such as IRS agents, tax agents here in the U.S. and Canada, Australia, and England, cops. I've spoken to city council members. You name it, I pretty much have done it. I've spoken to law professors, and a lot of the calls are on my website. It's just starting to get to a point now where they're getting familiar with what I'm doing, and so they're starting to get a blanket refusal to speak to me anymore.
Right. They're growing resistant. The parasites have grown resistant.
They don't, I had one tell me just yesterday after he had already made a fool of himself, and so before ending the phone call, he had to make a point to say, hey, and I do not want this broadcast on your radio show, and I do not give permission for you to broadcast this. I do not want to be on your network. Whatever.
Wow.
We didn't want you to attack us, so, you're threatening us with jail, so, I don't see how, it's so lopsided that he doesn't like having his phone call broadcast, but he's willing to put people in jail, so I think he's got some misdirected anger there.
Sounds like his jimmies were rustled.
Yeah, jimmies were definitely rustled, so if you listen to a lot of the calls that I've done, they're on my website, markstevens.net. There's definitely some rustling of jimmies. I had a law professor from the University of Victoria in British Columbia. Within 4 minutes, his jimmies were so rustled he had to hang up the phone.
Nice.
Oh, geez.
I really like that.
Yeah.
You did record it, though, right?
Oh, yeah, it's on the website. I let him know that I'm from the media, and I'm recording, and I think that's why he realized, I just made a complete fool of myself. I have to bail. So instead of threatening me with contempt and wiretapping, he just hung up the phone.
Right. Wise thing to do, because he did know you were recording it from the start, right? I hope.
Yes.
Okay,
if you listen to the recording, I have that where I told him I was from the media, and I'm recording, and I want to use his answers for a broadcast. So, I usually tell them. Sometimes I don't because I don't have to, and it depends on what I'm doing. If I'm actually doing it as a member of the media only, then I'll tend to tell them. If I'm doing it as part of an investigation, like what I'm doing in Idaho, I tend not to tell them. I'm not going to get anywhere if I tell them I'm recording. They're just going to hang up on me before I get any statements from them.
Right.
Okay. So I guess for the sake of our listeners, where do you stand politically? Sorry.
I don't. I am apolitical. I am an anarchist in the traditional sense that I reject the concept of authority or the concept of rulers, and I believe in the non-aggression principle that all human interactions should be voluntary. I do not believe in the concept of hierarchies and see that as extremely damaging. Even if there's no overt violence involved, there tends to be, hierarchies tend to always devolve into something that's going to work to keep the guys at the top, and right. So it will work to severely limit the choices of those near the bottom.
So you said voluntary. Does that mean, I know you don't sound like you're big on labels. I get that and I respect that, but would you say voluntarist then? Possibly?
Yeah, I would say, yeah, voluntarist in that all human interaction should be voluntary.
Now, is there a difference between anarchy and voluntarism?
I personally, I don't see that. I know that there's probably thousands of websites and radio shows or hosts that would try to make that distinction. I try to keep things simple. Let's go by one basic principle, do no harm. And the more consistent we are with that, the better our lives and the lives of the people around us will be. So I keep it simple that way. I'm not a philosopher, and I personally don't see any merit in debating the difference between anarcho-capitalism, anarcho-syndicalism. Is it voluntary, and are we not, harming anyone? To me, that's the important issue.
I thought I heard an interview once with Ron Paul where Ron Paul referred to himself as a voluntarist. I could have sworn I heard him say that once.
Yeah, he was asked once about it. I know what you're referencing.
Right.
To.
Okay. Good.
And he I forget his response to it, but yeah, he definitely, said something that he sees how it would work, the good aspects of it.
Mr. Stevens, what do you think about Ron Paul?
I think he's a nice guy. He comes off as a nice guy. I just don't agree with a lot of what he says politically. The few times that I've seen him in person, he dodged the really difficult questions. Even though he quoted or cited Lysander Spooner, he still insisted that it was a social contract and that the nature of the Constitution was contractual, and he didn't allow a follow-up question to that. So I have some pretty fundamental disagreements with him. He may be a voluntarist now. He's not a member of Congress anymore, but as far as my respect for him, it extends really only to his work as a doctor and some of the promotion he's done of the non-aggression principle.
Okay, fair enough.
I certainly don't agree with his political stances about, I agree with him about the Fed and whatnot should be ended, and I had some disagreements where he said that he mentioned publicly that as president there was nothing he could do to stop the income tax, and I disagreed with that. I believe that as president he could issue an executive order and just stop the election. Let Congress impeach him at that point, but he could still do something that would rally enough. If he was to actually stop the collection of the income tax, I don't think that they could get an impeachment through. It would be easier just to assassinate him.
Well, it would be easy. I mean, it wouldn't be too hard for him to do that, though, because if he became president, he would have shut down many of the government programs and dismantled and downsized the rest. So, I mean, we wouldn't have needed all that extra tax money in that case. So we could have safely,
My fundamental disagreement with it was if there really were that many people that supported him in ending the Fed and the income tax and other things, then he was really not necessary. The only thing that was necessary was for the people who believed that the Fed and the IRS should be a thing of the past. Just through non-compliance would have taken care of it. You wouldn't, and that's what it comes down to, is getting enough people not to comply, not to hope that some Messiah-like figure, whether it's Ron Paul or Romney or whoever, is going to start slashing programs and getting rid of the IRS. And that's why I didn't think that there were nearly enough people that were behind him to affect any kind of change. Because once you have the numbers, you don't need the figurehead.
Right. No, that's a good point. That's true. Hey, that's how I looked at Ron Paul. He was like a teacher, and he's trying to... So it is kind of like an ideological type deal where we're trying to convince as many people as we can, gain numbers, and then eventually we can take things over without having, like you said, like a figurehead. That's a good point, and I hope it gets to that point. We had Chris Cantwell back on a few months back, and we had a serious debate about anarchy, and I'm still not sold about it. I mean, I like the concept of not having any government, but I'm just curious how we're going to realistically get there in a safe manner without killing hundreds of millions of people in the process. Because, if you were to shut down government, we're so dependent on government now. I mean, hundreds of millions of people are so dependent on government that if we got rid of it overnight, there would be chaos. There would be. There's no way around it. It's not fear-mongering. It's just common sense. But so how do you avoid that? How do we safely dismantle the government to a size that's manageable so they don't get out of control and, continue to beat up on the population as they have been.
Well, one thing that's not going to, you're not going to get to a voluntary free society without the concept of government, because there is no government. There's just people, men and groups of and gangs of men and women forcing others to pay them. That's all. Yeah, that's all it is. All government is men and women forcing others to pay them. You're not going to. There's no way we're going to avoid the violence. It's going to. As peaceful as you and I may be in our non-compliance with them, that by not complying with them, that's one of the cardinal sins that you can commit against the people called government. They will attack you. And I agree with Chris Cantwell as far as we're in agreement with the non-aggression principle that moral defensive force and violence is always morally acceptable, and it's going to come down to mass civil disobedience where people are not complying, and it's also going to take, unfortunately, as these people called government keep pushing and pushing and pushing, it's going to take some defensive force, and people are unfortunately going to. We're in a state of war. They are constantly aggressing against us every day. When they're constantly aggressing against us, and I look at it this way: if it was 1845, and the question was, do we end slavery now? And so the typical response, well, but the Negro, they don't know how to read, and then there's going to be chaos, and there's going to be violence. Yes, there is. However, if it's the moral question is, you end it now. Will there be disruption if government collapsed tomorrow? Yes. But fortunately, we've got things like the Internet, we've got things like Bitcoin, that while there will be some violence and there's going to be some disruption, I don't think we're going to have the widespread chaos that a lot of people predict.
Right.
And I would put it this way. I would much rather have some level of chaos while where things are evening out and things are getting back to normal than to have the widespread secret prisons, drone strikes, indefinite detention, and wars. So I would. It's just like the typical thing. Who's going to build the roads? I would much rather never have a road built ever again if all we did was accomplish getting rid of the CIA.
Okay, fair enough. Well, you got a point there. I mean, the chaos has to be manageable. We have to. That's how we're going to downsize it, and it's not going to be easy. But, I mean, I think you're a little I love Bitcoin, by the way. I love it. I want more people to use it. But let's be honest here. 99% of the people have never even heard of it. I mean, with your circles and my circles, everyone's heard about it in our circles. But if you actually take a census, very few people will even know about it. So, we're not... I mean, the chaos...
But that's just one aspect.
Yeah.
That's it. Bitcoin is just one aspect. You've also got gold and silver. You've got barter. You've got community currency that people have been using, like Ithaca hours, that people have been using for a long time. So there are already barter networks, and already you've got the gift economies, for example, where people are freely trading based on abundance, and so it's not just Bitcoin, but it's just Bitcoin is just part. It's just part of the solution, and I think because of the Internet, if things were to collapse tomorrow, yes, it would be difficult, but I believe that they would correct themselves very, very quickly. And the trade-off is no wide-scale wars. For one, I mean, we've got indefinite detention. You've got drone strikes. You have police that are killing people every single day. How is it possible that you have a shoot-on-sight command from the LAPD, and they've shot 100 some odd bullets into the truck that had two pasty white women, and they're looking for a 6'4", 250-pound bald black guy.
Oh, Chris Dorner, yeah.
And they walk away. They burned even if the guy was a criminal, they burned him alive.
Oh yeah, no trial, anything.
So I think the trade-off, yes. It's not a utopia. We don't look for a utopia. It's not going to be. It's going to be tough. But I think when we weigh, when you're doing a cost-benefit analysis, a world without government is a lot more peaceful and productive than a world with government.
You see, it's like right now, if you look at it, Bitcoin, for instance, grocery stores aren't ready to accept Bitcoin yet. I mean, if they were, then that might be better. And if shit were to hit the fan, it might be too late for people to buy and purchase Bitcoin, or at that point it might become too expensive for it to even mean anything. So the people who are investing now are the ones who are going to be well off, of course, which is, I mean, if you're a listener, get yourself involved in Bitcoin. That's great. I think that's where it's at, if shit does hit the fan. But if shit really does hit the fan, I think personally that there's going to be like 100 million people that are in. I think it's going to be like the movie The Purge, all those crazy-ass movies where people are killing each other. It's going to be like The Walking Dead, I think. And I'm not trying to, sell fear or whatever. I don't want to be like a fear horror monger or whatever. I mean, it's just, I can't, we become too dependent.
What you keep referencing to, I mean, I'm sure you'll have a bunch of people that are already dependent on government for everything that, when the collapse happens, of course, yeah, they're going to go ape shit. But, like
not
Mark
just going to
said,
be some people. I think it's going to be most people, because most people didn't see this coming. They're dependent on government welfare, on Social Security, on their jobs. They're not growing their own food. They need the grocery stores. They don't even know how to grow their food if they wanted to. All they know how to do is to steal from others. So if shit hits the fan, you're going to have people trying to come to your house and raid you and your family. It's going to be crazy. It's going to be like it's going to be a bloodbath, I think. There's no way around it.
Well, it could be, but I don't see it where it's going to be a collapse, a sudden collapse. What I see happening is that, especially because of the internet, and that we can broadcast shows without any editorial oversight. I know my show, I can say whatever the hell I want.
Right.
And even if I wasn't, I could always do a podcast. That there's going to be more and more civil disobedience, more and more people not complying. And yes, there will be more people deciding, you know what, anybody violating the non-aggression principle and it starts to attack me, I'm going to use whatever force is necessary to stop it, and I don't care if they have a badge or not. And so what I see happening is, yeah, cops and IRS agents and DEA and whatnot, they're going to start getting killed because people are going to see that. In the work that I've done, and I have it on my website, I have confronted the politicians directly from all levels, and none of them are able to present one single fact to prove that their laws apply to us. It's all on my website. I have, again, it's a British Columbia law professor. I have a spokesman for the Attorney General's office out of Toronto. I have IRS agents. I have the police chief here in Scottsdale, Arizona. None of them have any evidence, period. It doesn't matter what area you're in, and I've done it in Australia and England, it doesn't matter. So they're not going to, people are going to see, and with me and others doing that, they don't have a legal justification. That's why I always ask them. I said, look, if I was to do business the same as you guys, the so-called government, and I forced everyone in the community to pay me, would you consider me a criminal? And they get very upset because they know what they're doing is criminal. And with the work that I'm doing and exposing them and bringing and doing this in court also, that when they make the claim, hey, we have the law, and I can tell them, no, you don't. No, you don't. Because they have never been able to produce the evidence. And when people see that, they'll be pushing back more. And by pushing back, I mean through non-compliance, and when appropriate, using defensive force to stop them.
Your work sounds very important, and so I have to say, there's very few people who actually confront these criminals, and so thanks for that. I appreciate that. I guess a lot of people do too. So, and I'm checking out your website now. So I'm on the same boat. My concern is just how to get there. I guess one thing that I would think that we would agree on is if the government were to collapse, that the only way it would actually work is if all governments globally collapse at the same time. Because if it's just our government that collapsed, then there's a good chance that another government is going to take us over, and we're going to get a worse off government than what we have now.
Well, it's possible. The difference is that the reason why most people do not shoot government agents now that are committing crimes against them, that are attacking them, is because they have a belief in the myth of authority, that they are superhumans where the ordinary rules of morality don't apply. So they don't shoot them. Because if I was to do what a cop does, like there was a cop that broke into someone's house in Texas in the middle of the night. It was one of these no-knock raids. He got shot in the face and he died. If I did the same thing, I deserve to get shot in the face. If another government tried to come in and attack, barring a nuclear strike, if putting troops on the ground the people would have no problem attacking Canadians that were invading. They would have no problem attacking South Americans who were attacking. So the average American is so heavily armed that well, look, bottom line, what the two major superpowers in the world, you've got Russia and the United States. How well did it work out in Afghanistan for them? Right.
Of course. Oh, yeah. And that's what the same thing's happening to us economically, right? And we're almost at the point where I think, at what point will the tipping point become? I mean, our debt's, what is it? It's nearly $18 trillion. Did it pass $18 trillion yet? I don't think so.
Oh, it's probably past that when you add everything in. It comes down to the tipping point is when a certain percentage of the people no longer see them as legitimate and see them as the criminals that they are. When enough people are applying the same principles of morality that apply to normal people like us, and they apply to people called government, that's the tipping point. Because at that point, they no longer have a perception of legitimacy. So when they violate the non-aggression principle and they attack us, when we shoot them or we defend ourselves against them, they don't have the moral high ground. We do. We're going to be seen properly as the victims who are attacked. They're going to be seen as the criminals that they are. And once that tips, and people know, and they don't buy into this nonsense of authority, that's what it all comes down to. They believe that they are some kind of authority figure. It's not okay to shoot them. Right. And that's why they think it's an extremist thing, like like Jefferson used to say, about the tree of liberty needs to be refreshed with the blood of tyrants and patriots. Right. And that belief in authority is what is holding it all in place. It's morally reprehensible to the average person to think if a cop breaks into your home and is trying to kill you, that you're not morally justified to kill him. And you are. You are very much, yeah. Very much. And I'd like to see that happen more. Cops breaking in the... No. Mark, do you... realize that they could get shot and not and actually not aggress against us. I don't want to see anybody killed. The cops start to realize that, oh my gosh, if I break into this house on a no-knock warrant, I could be killed. Because look, how many times do you hear about them busting down the door with a no-knock raid in Compton? Right. Good point. They ain't leaving there. They're leaving a body bag. Mark, you going to say something?
Well, I was just going to ask you, Mark, if you see the turning point happening, do you see people, kind of realizing that, this imaginary authority over them? Like, I mean, are we getting through to people?
I believe so. I'm getting more people that, and I have new people contacting me, new listeners, and people contacting me who are being attacked and are standing up for themselves. I've got 2 more cases that tickets that were thrown out or complaints that were thrown out this week that I'm posting, and that's just a fraction of what I could post if everyone gave me the documentary evidence. I may announce on the show that a ticket was thrown out, but I prefer to have the documentary proof. And so I'm posting tonight or tomorrow 2 more dismissal notices. So in that respect, yes, you see things like Pork Fest and things like that, where there's more people every year, and more people are refusing to take a deal. They're requesting jury trials and pushing it to the limit, which is great. And more people are confronting these city councils, like I've done. I've got video of me confronting city councils. And I even have one city council member, as far as when I confronted them in Tempe about evidence their laws apply, he said, here's your evidence of jurisdiction. We have jurisdiction because we said so. Right. Oh, yeah. It's like a parent, like an ignorant parent that doesn't know how to explain something to their kid. Yeah, and the problem, and I posted to show that I went through every major media outlet here in Phoenix to get that call and that video publicized so people could see that, and I was told that I was a conspiracy theorist. And, right. But it's on video. And if a video like that, if people could see the sheer arrogance and the callousness of them, they may say, hey, you know what? If you don't put the evidence on the table, I'm not going to comply with you. And they were under the impression, Mark, you think we're going to change our minds? No. I'm going to change the minds of your victims, and they're not going to comply with you. Hell, a few of them may even fight back. You're not my audience, Mr. Councilman. Your victims are.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so now, I guess one of the things that I should say is, like, first off, people should not, if they can get away with it, not pay taxes, because the taxes are just disgusting. You know, what it's going towards, the military, you know, the domestic to the police state. It's disgusting. We're overtaxed. We're basically we're basically almost slaves. I mean, we're getting very little of our own money, and then the money that we spend gets taxed how many times over and over again. So it's a disgusting system. Our founders, you know, they wouldn't have tolerated a tenth of what we're tolerating. But I look at government as, I personally believe government is a necessary evil. I don't like government, but on a limited level, like on the bare necessity of things, and only, like, I'm talking about like a government we've never even seen, like less government than what we started off with in this country, what this world has never seen, like so limited.
But is support still compulsory?
Oh yeah, well that's the thing. That's why I consider a necessary evil. Yeah, because if instead of paying like 30% tax, what we're paying today, and we're paying even more than that afterwards, and then we have a death tax or a real estate tax, whatever it's called. If it was like, instead of 30%, if we were paying like 2% perhaps, like a very tiny amount, like if it was actually something that was fair, then I could see that be. I still couldn't see it being voluntary, because then people probably wouldn't pay it. So I would definitely, even at that point, I mean, as bad as it sounds, I think it should be required, and people should pay it at 2%. And if they don't, yeah, unfortunately, they're going to have to be forced to pay it through force.
Okay,
I don't like that.
So if you're the one in charge of this and forcing people to pay, would the people be morally justified in shooting you if you try to force them to pay?
I mean, I guess they would be morally justified, but they're not going to win, and I don't think they should in that case. Because I mean, look,
they're not going to win.
This is a screwed up society. I get what you're saying. This is a screwed up society, completely corrupt. But if it was actually a fair government that was actually for the people, then I think most people wouldn't. I think most people would want to pay it. And the few people who don't would be looked at as black sheep, and it would be like, okay, well, they're just being stubborn drama queens, you know?
Okay, but the principle, see, where it starts getting crazy and irrational is when you get away from the principle. Now, do you believe in do no harm, and that it's wrong to initiate or threaten force against others?
Right. It's wrong.
Now, if you agree with that, okay, so if it's wrong to initiate force or threaten force, then obviously you would, to be consistent, then even a little bit of aggression is wrong. So that's the problem, that you're trying to limit something where it's not logical, it's not rational to say, well, we're going to steal from you and we're going to force you to do this, but we're just not going to steal as much as the other guys. And it just doesn't work. It's not a rational, logical, moral standpoint, and that's why minarchy falls so flat on its face when you start to deconstruct it and you actually examine it, because you're saying it's necessary, by your opinion, that's subjective. It's necessary to steal from everybody because not everyone will pay.
Right.
And that's the basis of your position, and it's doomed to failure. If it's voluntary.
Well, maybe they can, the people who refuse to, because at that point, if it's actually a legitimate society that's fair to the people, and it's actually run by the people, then it's like at that point we could just deport everyone who doesn't want to pay. We don't have to kill them and lock them up. I mean, I'm just saying,
how do you deport them?
It's wrong. It is wrong, but that's why I say it's a necessary evil. Because how else are you going to...
Why is it necessary?
Because
it's necessary... I have to go here in a second, but it's necessary for you to violate your own personal principle of being the non-aggression principle. Right. You have to actually be violent because you think it's necessary. Mm-hmm. Why is it necessary to force people to pay you?
I wouldn't want to be violent, but I mean, because if you don't collect from them and it becomes voluntary, then there's a good chance that nobody will pay it.
But what service is so important you have to force everyone to pay you? What particular service is that important?
That's what I was going to ask.
Military.
So in order to protect people, you have to force them to pay you.
we got to protect ourselves from other countries. That's it. I mean, because if other countries still have their governments and they still have their militaries, our militias aren't going to be able to organize and go up against them. I don't believe that.
But what would happen, what I see happening, especially since we have the internet and so many people are connected and have that if the government was to fall here peacefully and it was a voluntary free society, don't you think that would have a domino effect, let's say in Canada, Mexico, South America? I personally think there would be very few holdouts because people would start to realize, wow, if the United States is now actually free, we can too. And so the only thing propping up the tyrants in China is compliance.
And possibly the central bankers. Because, I mean, if we fall... Right, but I hope if that's what happens, what you're saying happens, and it's a domino effect. I mean, but that's like a huge gamble. Like, we would have to really... And that would have to happen with every government. And whatever government's left is going to be funded by some crazy central bankers who have been wanting to take over America for hundreds of years. Because, I mean, they really...
Well, the central bankers... Well, I'm sorry, but the central bankers can't do most of what they do, if not all of what they do, without a coercive central state. Right. So without a coercive government forcing people, plus, when you don't have a government, you don't have corporations anymore. You have just people. And so what you're doing is you're taking away a lot of the hierarchy that society functions under. And without that hierarchy where people are all on the same plane and they don't have a government monopoly on something, it's very difficult for them to do what they're doing. I wish I had more time, but most of these issues are based off of the false concept of authority. And I'm really sorry. I hope I can join you guys again and further this discussion.
Yeah,
it's an interesting conversation. I mean, yeah.
Absolutely. We'll definitely get you back on, Mark.
I appreciate it, guys.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it coming on.
Thanks for coming on, man.
Thanks.
Yeah, take care.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
I'm going to check out your website. Thanks.
Yeah.
Take care. Okay. Excellent. I mean, yeah. So, I like his idea. I mean, he's a bit optimistic, I think, or risky. It sounds risky to me. It just sounds, and I think our life, freedom, and liberty is just. It's not worth the gamble. I mean, I want to see it happen to where it's just, I don't know, man. It just seems too risky. Too many lives at stake, and our freedom is at stake at that case. I think there could be
Welcome to CAB Radio 2.0. Here are your hosts, Chris Perkins, Mark Cummins, and Jeff Giles.
Hi, Mark. How's it going?
I'm doing well. How are you guys doing?
All right. Thank you.
Not too bad. We one of my co-hosts here also has the name Mark. So are we going to do
Hello, Mark.
What are we going to call you, Mr. Cummings?
Mark C. We'll just call me Mark C.
I'm not going to remember that.
Neither am I.
You guys could just refer to me as the schmuck from Long Island. I'm kind of used to that.
Nice.
That's being nice compared to what I usually get from these politicians that I speak to every day.
Uh-oh. What sort of you mean like legit, actual Sounds like his jimmies were rustled.
Yeah, jimmies were definitely rustled. So if you listen to a lot of the calls that I've done, they're on my website, markstevens.net. There's definitely some rustling of jimmies. I had a law professor from the University of Victoria in British Columbia. Within 4 minutes, his jimmies were so rustled he had to hang up the phone.
Nice.
Oh, jeez.
I really like that.
Yeah.
You did record it, though, right?
Oh, yeah, it's on the website. I let them know that I'm from the media, and I'm recording, and And I think that's why he realized, oh, I just made a complete fool of myself. I have to bail. So instead of threatening me with contempt and wiretapping, he just hung up the phone.
Right. Wise thing to do. Because he did know you were recording it from the start, right? I hope.
Yes.
Okay,
If you listen to the recording, I have that where I told him I was from the media and I'm recording and I want to use his answers for broadcast. So, I usually tell them. Sometimes I don't because I don't have to, and it depends on what I'm doing. If I'm actually doing it as a member of the media only, then I'll tend to tell them. If I'm doing it as part of an investigation, like what I'm doing in Idaho, I tend not to tell them. I'm not going to get anywhere if I tell them I'm recording. They're just going to hang up on me before I get any statements from them.
Politicians or people who are trying to hack into the system, like the good kind, the people who actually mean well.
I speak to bureaucrats and politicians of all stripes. I've spoken to low-level tyrants such as IRS agents, tax agents here in the U.S. and Canada, Australia, and England, cops. I've spoken to city council members. You name it, I pretty much have done it. I've spoken to law professors, and a lot of the calls are on my website. It's just starting to get to a point now where they're getting familiar with what I'm doing, and so they're starting to get a blanket refusal to speak to me anymore.
Right. They're growing resistant. The parasites have grown resistant.
They don't, I had one tell me just yesterday after he had already made a fool of himself, and so before ending the phone call, he had to make a point to say, hey, and I do not want this broadcast on your radio show, and I do not give permission for you to broadcast this. I do not want to be on your network. Whatever.
Wow.
We didn't want you to attack us, so, you're threatening us with jail, so, I don't see how, it's so lopsided that he doesn't like having his phone call broadcast, but he's willing to put people in jail, so I think he's got some misdirected anger there.
Okay. So, I guess, for the sake of our listeners, where do you stand politically? Sorry.
I don't. I am apolitical. I am an anarchist in the traditional sense that I reject the concept of authority or the concept of rulers, and I believe in the non-aggression principle that all human interactions should be voluntary. I do not believe in the concept of hierarchies and see that as extremely damaging. Even if there's no overt violence involved, there tends to be, hierarchies tend to always devolve into something that's going to work to keep the guys at the top, and right. So it will work to severely limit the choices of those near the bottom.
So you said voluntary. Does that mean, I know, you don't sound like you're big on labels. I get that and I respect that, but would you say voluntarist then, possibly?
Yeah, I would say, yeah, voluntarist in that all human interaction should be voluntary.
Now, is there a difference between anarchy and voluntarism?
I personally, I don't see that. I know that there's probably thousands of websites and radio shows or hosts that would try to make that distinction. I try to keep things simple. Let's go by one basic principle, do no harm. Sure. And the more consistent we are with that, the better our lives and the lives of the people around us will be. So I keep it simple that way. I'm not a philosopher, and I personally don't see any merit in debating the difference between anarcho-capitalism, anarcho-syndicalism. Is it voluntary, and are we not, harming anyone? To me, that's an important issue.
I thought I heard an interview once with Ron Paul where Ron Paul referred to himself as a voluntarist. I could have sworn I heard him say that once.
Yeah, he was asked once about it. I know what you're referencing.
Right.
To.
Okay. Good.
And he I forget his response to it, but yeah, he definitely, said something that he sees how it would work, the good aspects of it.
Mr. Stevens, what do you think about Ron Paul?
I think he's a nice guy. He comes off as a nice guy. I just don't agree with a lot of what he says politically. The few times that I've seen him in person, he dodged the really difficult questions. Even though he quoted or cited Lysander Spooner,